Hi everybody, welcome to another Broken Meeple video, and this one I haven't done a lot in the past, I must admit. I think I did a couple last summer and then I haven't really updated it since, so my apologies. But for some reason everybody's interested in why you don't want to keep a game anymore. So it's like, okay, maybe I need to pay a bit more attention to that when I cull games. I did a couple last year where I said like why Cooper Island's leaving the collection and stuff like that. But for the most part, I haven't really talked about this in detail, so I figured I'd start doing it. So I am doing another cull of games, and we're talking a small cull. I mean, a few games would be due, but I'm specifically talking about games that have been in my collection and will no longer be in my collection. So not review copies, not stuff like that, you know, not games that I've had, tried, and didn't put in the collection to begin with. It's going to be ones that I have kept for some time. So I'm just going to go briefly over these four and explain in honest terms why I'm getting rid of them. So first off, we have Duelosaur Island. This is the Extreme Edition version from Pandasaurus Games. I have got Dinosaur World along with the expansion, fully kitted out and jam-packed into those two boxes there. I love Dinosaur Island. It is one of my favourite Euro games. However, this one is still good. It is a two-player only version along with a solo game mode, and to be fair, the solo game is the main reason I've kind of hung on to it for some time, but it's essentially a kind of watered down version of Dinosaur Island. You use the dice, the DNA dice as before, you build up a theme park with dinosaurs, you get the DNA and you make certain dinosaurs, but it's mainly cards. You get the dinosaur cards, you get the theme park ride cards, you got a couple of like helper cards. It's very similar to what you do in that game, except it's just sort of watered down and a bit shorter. With this one, the main issue is, as much as I kind of like the solo mode in this, I didn't think it was like great. It wasn't one that I wanted to come back to all the time, and personally, if I want to get my, like, sink my teeth, no pun intended, into this thing, then I'd kind of rather just play the big version of Dinosaur Island. I don't see why I need to play the Duelosaur version. I could just play the solo of that one. Yes, this is smaller, but I'd rather get the big feel, you know what I'm saying? So this one kind of just didn't really hook me as a solo game, and because I can't get two-player games to the table that often, it just didn't feel like it was worth keeping in the collection. So hopefully a couple somewhere will get some goodness out of that, because that is a Extreme Edition version with some very funky components. So now we have Manhattan from Foxmind. This is the re-implementation of one of the classic gateway games that exist. Very simply, you are basically building skyscrapers on a grid map, and you get points based on how high the building is and how much of the building you contributed to, so they're like mixture of colours. You get translucent building pieces, and very straightforward each turn. You basically just play a card, or you play a card from your hand, I believe. It's been a while since I've played this, but it will have a location, and you basically choose that respective city, put it in the grid, build them up, you take your buildings off other players. It's very mean, very vindictive, very simple. I mean, literally, you can pick up and play this game, but so I don't know, it kind of got a bit samey after a while, and certainly you have to be into mean games to really get the full enjoyment of this. Now, it's only a 45-minute game, so it's not like you're being mean for that long, and it looks beautiful, although the translucent pieces did make it a little bit difficult to make out the colour differentiation at times, particularly, I mean, if you're colourblind and you try to play this, God help you. But, you know, it just kind of got a little bit samey, and every time I had a choice of what, like, gateway game to bring out to the table, I usually chose other gateway games over this one. Not to say that this is a bad game. I still recommend people give it a try if you see it, but I just kind of felt like bringing out other gateway games, really. I mean, I've got Reef and Azul and Flan Rouge and Catan and Carcassonne and Citadels and all sorts of other games that would, like, I'd just rather play, that I enjoy more than this one. So this is good, and, you know, I reckon that for a game cafe, this is definitely a worthy purchase for the library, but it's just not really going to stick around in my collection. Alright, now we got one that's somewhat controversial of late, shall we say. Santa Maria, basically a themeless colonial-themed game. Now, I gotta admit, the game is good, but the rules were a little bit fiddly to understand in this one, and certainly, I mean, I don't care about the theme, alright? This might as well be an abstract game. The theme is barely represented in here, and I don't have a problem with this type of theme as much as other people do. I tend to disconnect myself from that, but I can understand why it would put people off. But it wasn't exactly a looker, this game, really. I mean, I like the mechanics of it, where you were drafting dice and you were putting like tiles on your personal grid and activating rows and columns to get special bonuses. It was quite a tricky game to master, but for the most part, you were just leveling up on a few tracks, and like I say, the theme was barely there. It felt like a Stefan Feld game without actually being a Stefan Feld game. And like I say, I didn't have a problem so much with the mechanics, it just felt a little bit bland each time I was playing it. I couldn't get immersed into it, and another problem I had was that this one, I never even got a chance to try out the expansion in this. I got the expansion and just never found the time to play it. But I feel like I don't need this because I've got Rajas of the Ganges in my collection. Now, Rajas of the Ganges is not the same mechanically as this one. So, you know, don't say that, oh, this is identical to this. It's not. But both of them are midweight Euros. Both of them use dice, just in slightly different ways. And both of them involve you having something in front of you that you build up with tiles. This one requires you to do the rows and columns. This one makes you build up a little mini Carcassonne map with symbols. So yes, they are clearly different games, but in another way, they're not. I felt like, well, I've already got a midweight dice placement, dice/drafting game where I don't think you draft them in this one. I think you like roll them and do stuff. But like I say, I've got a dice-based midweight Euro that looks better than this one. That gives me the Carcassonne map style of building on front of me, which this one sort of does, but it's more about just getting the rows and columns of symbols, whereas this one actually has you build like pathways and stuff. So this one kind of overtakes it. And I just felt like I don't need both in the collection. And if you were going to ask me which one I'd rather play, this one, hands down. I'd rather play Rajas of the Ganges. It looks better. It's, I would say, easier to play than this one is in terms of the rule set. And this one, again, it's got, I don't care that the theme is colonial themed, but I don't care about that theme either. And as I say, this might as well be an abstract game because you are just leveling up a bunch of tracks and collecting tokens for the most part. So it wasn't bad, but again, this kind of like was a 7 out of 10. And when you get to the 7 out of 10 rating, it's harder to stay in my collection because my collection has now reached like bursting at the seams. And space-wise, you know, we live in the UK, we don't have giant houses like you lot in America. And so having space for more games, I kind of have to keep it to rank 8 and above games unless they are like fundamental gateway teaching aids. But yeah, this one just couldn't really stay in my collection, although I'll give it props. This probably is one of the longest games to survive in the collection when it was on like the roll call for being culled. You know, imagine like you're watching something like Strictly Come Dancing or American Idol or whatever, and you get one contestant that's constantly on the final 2 to get culled, but then survives every week. That's kind of what this was. Every week I'm sort of thinking, oh, this should probably go out of the collection, but then something else goes rather than it, and it survives another day. Unfortunately, it can't survive forever, and so it needs to go. And then finally, and this one kind of makes me a little bit sad because I was championing this one for quite some time, and that is Reykholt. Reykholt is, I think that's how you pronounce it anyway, or Reykholt or whatever. It's an Icelandic-based Uri Rosenberg game, farming, and I apologise if you hear the noise outside, but essentially with this one, you are, again, well, it's Uri Rosenberg. What do you think you're doing? You're farming, okay? You are farming. But here you have these really cool like things with all the like the holders for all your vegetables. You're building greenhouses, growing veg, and it's a race game. I mean, technically it's a VP game in a sense, but what you're doing is you're feeding the tourists, and around the side of the board you essentially have like the different food requirements that get steadily more and more as you go through. It was a very well produced game, a bit expensive for how much you paid for it though, but it was a very light worker placement game. 2, 3, 4 players in a solo mode, which didn't really amount to much, but it was generally quite quick. You could get a game of this done in about an hour to hour and a half. I think the 30 to 60 minute timer on the back of the box was a complete lie. You try playing this in 30 minutes with 2 or more players. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. But it was a decent enough like game, but very samey. There was really only a couple of ways you could play the game in terms of like, oh, am I going to go for the big greenhouses or a lot of the small ones? The whole idea of destroying your greenhouses for getting boosted up the track was something you did at the very end of the game rather than at any other point during the game, because you obviously can't destroy your greenhouses early because then you slow yourself down. And with only, what, like 6, 7 rounds in the game, you don't have time to build yourself back up very easily. There's only so many spaces you could do, and if you had less players, you had even less choice of spaces to go to. It just kind of got a little bit repetitive. The other problem that I did have with this though was the card system. You have these cards in the game where they gained you like a special ability. And if you took the card, it required you to go out of your way to get them. You got the card, only you had that card, but if somebody else went to a different space, they could share the card ability with you. Now that was a cool concept. The problem is, you get 5 cards every game. That's it. You basically pick the A, B, C, D, E set or whatever, and you get 5 cards. That's it for the whole game. I mean, why couldn't we have had like lots of different cards come out and you could have had all sorts of really cool abilities and that? But the fact that you barely see any of the cards in each game kind of helps with replay value, but then it also felt like a wasted potential of like, oh, I can have this. This could have been like a kind of lightweight version of Halito, because Halito's done that now with the cards that get you cool bonuses and that. We could have literally had that already in this one, but I think they kind of missed the mark by restricting how many you saw. The story mode and the solo mode, whatever, you don't care about the story, it just unlocked more cards for you to have in the main game, but because you only see so many of them, it's not really helping from that extent. So again, like Santa Maria, this one kind of survived for a while, and I still like the game. So if people want me to teach them this at conventions or something, I would happily play it, but again, 7 out of 10. It's gotta decide whether it's coming or going, and in this case, it's going. So, that's the next set of games to be culled from the collection. I'll try and do this every now and again if I get like, say, not just like every time I get one game out of the collection, maybe when I get like 2, 3 or 4 out, I will talk briefly about them, but that's it for this video. I'll see you next time. Take care, and remember as always, it's only a game. Bye for now.